Card Games TV Podcast, me being unbeatable. Alright, so this isn't just an old story. There's a lot of players nowadays, or I should say in the community, I'm known for certain things. No super combos being one of those things. Recently, being a Hatchiac player. I'm not a content creator, but a lot of people think I am. And what else? Of course, there's a lot of people think I'm a bad player. A lot of people think my deck sucks. Like my deck list sucks. What else? But specifically, it's, back to the whole bad player concept, right? The idea of being a bad player. Also, the idea that some people, use the excuse that because I wasn't playing competitively, but now I'm starting to be able to because I have the opportunities to. It's not that I don't have the desire to or the financial capabilities to play competitively. It's just, it's a matter of timing, having the time to do it, because I do work. It's not like I have money for free. I have to actually work for it, obviously. So I don't have the time to be able to go to events like I would like to. But I've been fortunate enough to be able to find some opportunities where I can, and I'll do my best to try to set up. I am looking ahead of time. There's a regionals that I'm looking into trying to go to. Just got to figure out the transportation. Because, if the regionals was inside my city, in the city of Philadelphia, that'd be easy, right? That wouldn't be that much of a problem. I would make sure I can make it. I would put the effort to make sure I can make it. I could ask for a day off for the event. So there's that. But anyway, the thing is, some people just like, oh, you don't play competitively, therefore whatever you say about the game is irrelevant. So there was some people with that level of ignorance, thinking that you have to play at tournaments in order for you to be competent when it comes to I'm gonna say children's card game, right? I'm gonna put it that way. Even though this wasn't designed for children, clearly, unlike Yu-Gi-Oh, which was clearly designed for children, it doesn't matter. Most card games, on average, are played by young adults and older adults anyway, so it's irrelevant. A game is a game, regardless of age, right? If you're capable of playing the game, then you can play the game. Age is irrelevant. But that's why it's so funny, the idea of thinking there's something wrong. If you don't play competitively, you can't talk about the game. It's like that's not how that works. That's just ignorance. But not too surprising. That's what leads to the whole toxicness, right? That type of mentality, that type of concept. Just like there's players that think that you have to net deck. The net decking is something you have to do. And what's ironic with that is that large majority of the community believes in net decking, right? Believes that net decking is A-okay, but doesn't realize the irony, not the irony, but the issue with that, the idea of net decking is whose deck are you copying? If everybody's net decking, then nobody's net decking, if you understand what I mean. If everybody's net decking, that means no one's building. So if no one's building, who the hell are you copying from? There was a time where it was I'll say 5% of the of a card game community was net deckers. Was people who just copy decks. Whenever you're in a play group, like in a lot of my older play groups, we would have one or two people who had a habit of net decking. Either they actually copied off online or they actually copied off of each other. I had somebody who copied off my deck once. Well, actually, those two people who copied off of my deck, right? I'm like, Now, one person did it more out of respect. They did it as an homage. They're fans, so they made a version of my deck for fun. And I'm like, I'm not against that. I'm cool with that. But there was somebody else who did it just because of net decking, just because like, oh my God, your deck's amazing. I want the same thing. And then they did. And then they copied the deck. They played against other people. Yes, the deck is good. Yes, the deck, obviously was getting that person a lot of wins, but that was the thing. Their behavior was like they're an amazing player, when in reality it was literally my deck that gave them that ability. But I'm the one who came up with the deck design in the first place. I'm the one who came up with the build and the strategy and the concepts of playing it. So this person mimicked and copied me. So essentially they were getting a lot of wins based off of me, based off of imitating me. So of course at that time, that kind of behavior was frowned upon. Now it's what everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to be like someone else. Everybody wants to copy off of one another. To me, the way I look at it is like copying off of somebody else's test. Instead of you studying to be smart and pass a test on your own, you're just going to look right next to you and copy off of the person who actually did study, who actually did learn what they needed to learn in order to pass the test. And you're just going to copy so that way you can get the passing grade, and then act like you're smart, but you're not. You didn't learn anything. The only thing you know is just the answers, right? You just know the answers to the test. You don't know the knowledge. You don't know the information. You don't even know what the answers mean. You just know that those are the answers, right? You don't understand the purpose of the answers. Same thing when you net deck. You don't know the purpose of the person's deck other than maybe you saw a couple combos in the deck, probably saw a video of the deck in action, and it's like, oh, okay, I like that. I want to copy that. I want to do what that person did in the video. And yes, you can copy, you can mimic, you could, pretend to be something, be somebody else, but you're never truly going to be that person. You're not guaranteed to get the same results as that person. The likelihood of you playing the deck exactly the way that person would and make the same decisions that person would make is very slim. But anyway, the point is that I play the way I play, so I have a play style, which is not really too unique of a play style, right? It's essentially just aggro. It's just that, I noticed that a lot of people, especially at the beginning of the game, play so differently that, the whole slowness, like they'll play an energy, end their turn, play another energy on turn 2, end their turn, and they don't even attack the leader. Or if they do, they only attack for the first 3 turns, deal the opponent 3 damage, and then after turn 3, they stop swinging. They try to wait until like maybe turn 6 or 7 to try to deal the last, try to deal 5 damage a 1 turn type thing. And hey, if it works for them, fine. I'm not against it. If it works for them, right? But I always saw how there was a level of luck. Sorry. There was a level of luck when it came to that. It's like, yeah, that's not the most ideal strategy. One, it takes long, and the duels take so long because y'all waiting so long. So y'all stalling very long. So the game doesn't end in a short period of time. It takes a long time for the game. So that way of playing was slow. And since it was slow, obviously it takes more time to play the game when y'all playing the game that slow. So I saw that as a problem. So I was like, well, I'd rather play fast. And I'm like, why are they playing slow? Why do they have a problem with dealing more than 3 damage? And then, once you figure that out, it's like, oh, okay. Because they hate they don't want their opponent to awaken. So they consider that a problem. They don't want their opponent awakened. They're trying to starve their opponent of resources is what the term was. They're trying to starve their opponent of resources. This is also part of why they like to use the effect crit and do the first 3 damage in critical damage, right? In crit damage. So attacking with like a Vegeta leader that has crit and then Champa it So you do double strike crit, so that way your opponent doesn't benefit from it, but you still dealt damage, but they don't benefit from it. And then just leave them at 5 life until you're ready, to go for game, which is to try to deal all 5 damage in one turn, right? And you want to starve them of resources, which is why you don't let them awaken, right? Because most leaders had the draw 2 when you awaken. Most leaders obviously had draw on the awaken side. So you're trying to prevent them from gaining any hand advantage from that. And then of course, by you critting their life, they get no hand advantage from that. So that means every turn they draw, they charge, they draw and they charge, which means their hand size doesn't get bigger, it stays the same. Or if they combo defensively, right? Or combo offensively, they're losing card advantage. So I understand the strategy. It's just y'all doing it. Y'all playing that way more out of fear than out of it being a good strategy. Out of it being a smart, strategic line of play. It was just more out of fear. You're afraid of your opponent drawing cards and getting to their good cards and using their good cards against you. So it's more of a preventative measure than it was a good, strategy to win the game. It was just more of trying to prevent your opponent from being able to play the game. So that way you can hopefully, not actually, but hopefully have the advantage or beat your opponent. Another thing is people like to awaken early, so they, like the idea of self-awakening, try to get themselves to 4 life so they can awaken and all these other factors. So there's a lot of stuff people are doing this like, a lot of that stuff is not logical. So obviously I didn't agree with the way everybody else played. So, I played the way I played. Now, I tried their way, right? The way everybody else played, just to see, how it works, right? To see how it plays out, right? It's hard to judge something if you don't try, right? Right? That's the irony in my life, right? Because a lot of people will look at my videos, and whenever I talk or share information, they'll want to do that, right? They'll judge my stuff without even trying it out. It's like, okay, you're not going to try it, but you still feel like you want to say something about it. Like, all right, whatever. I know the truth. Y'all clearly don't, because y'all didn't try it to find out the truth. But anyway, so I tried it, didn't work out, or it just wasn't the best optimal thing. It's like, yeah, I get why y'all doing it, but it's pointless to do it. Like, you don't need to be afraid of your opponent having a lot of cards or a big hand size. Now, I agree with the idea of crit damage, of course. You don't want to give your opponent card advantage from that, but not awakening your opponent or not allowing your opponent to awaken, that I don't agree with. That was pointless, because the goal is to win by dealing 8 damage. So deliberately holding back, dealing damage just because you don't want your opponent to draw for their leader, draw from their leader's backside, just didn't make sense. It just wasn't logical. And at the same time, I can understand you don't want one out of that situation, out of that strategy, which I don't agree with, but out of that strategy, I can understand one aspect of it, which is the whole idea of you want to wait until you're ready to start swinging, right? And then your opponent awakens on your turn. You want to put your opponent in a position where they awaken on your turn, as opposed to awakening on their turn. You don't want them to, save their awakening, especially if they are a untapped 2 energy leader. You definitely don't want them to awaken on their turn. So you want to force your opponent to awaken on your turn. So that's one thing I definitely got out of that, strategy of, holding back, was that. But it's like, I was like, well, I'm not going to hold back my damage output just, and then, out of fear of my opponent being awakened. Like, I find out that it's better that you force your opponent to awaken, especially early. That way, late game, they don't have their awaken as a trump card. So then I started realizing that awakening it's like a trump card, right? It's very important. It can come in handy. It could literally save you. Like if your opponent is trying to go for game, you're tapped out, right? So you have no way of negating. Your hand size might be a little low, especially if you just finished comboing. So your hand size is a little low, right? And then your opponent's trying to swing for game, and then you're like, okay, let's see what happens. Awaken, draw 2, perfect. I got a super combo. You know, if you were playing super combo at the time, and I was playing super combo at the time, so it's like, all right, cool. I can super combo now since I have less than 4 life, and now I can start drawing it and potentially survive this turn. And if I do, oh great, then I get another turn. So it was more of a comeback. And that was part of the mechanic. The reason you awaken is to kind of be a comeback. Like that's why you awaken when you're low on life, as in you're losing, and then suddenly a transformation, suddenly a power boost happens, and now you can turn the tables around, or you can make a comeback. That was the whole idea. It's a comeback mechanic. So that's why it's like I'd rather save my awakening for late game. Makes no sense to try to awaken turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. Like that's too early. Wait until turn 5 and above. But typically, the way games are nowadays, you tend to awaken typically on turn 4, maybe 3, but typically 4. Turn 4 is when you tend to awaken, depending. Now me, I tend to awaken. I tend to not awaken on turn 4. I tend to awaken like on turn 5 or 6, depending on what deck I'm playing. But the main thing is I always try to make sure I don't awaken first. I rather save my awakening. I rather my opponent awakens first, then I awaken. So then I started getting into the habit of playing to force my opponent to awaken first. So force them to awaken first, force them to use all their negates or to use negates early game, and force them to use super combos. So these are 3 things, and blocker as well. But mainly their defense is what I'm trying to say. I try to force them to use a lot of the defensive cards early game. So within the first 4 turns of the game, which is early game and mid game, I tend to try to force them to use up a lot of their defensive resources. So that way all they have is just their offensive resources, right? And then late game, typically turn 5 or higher, that's when I try to go for game. And my opponent should be really low on defensive cards, right? Defensive options, because I made sure that they used it up early game. And this is the kind of stuff that I do. I notice a lot of other players in the community don't do that. I've seen a lot of competitive play, and that's not something that they try to do. They don't try to force out a whole bunch of super combos, a whole bunch of, or even force out, combos from the opponent. They don't put their opponents in positions where they have to combo as much. But I always do, because I always try to force my opponent to combo, because to me, it's like a form of hand control. So by forcing my opponent to combo, that's essentially like me activating rebrand, right? Now imagine I force my opponent to combo right and then hit them with a rebrand. That's 4 cards out their hand, typically, right? So I do stuff like that. But anyway, the thing is that I tried different things, and then I found what works, or at least what works for me. But I've also seen it work for others. But typically, I'm one of the few players that actually utilizes this, the strategy. I tend to try to go, and this is where I started, finding out, and the concept of the first 4 damage is the easiest, because I noticed that not only in real life gameplay, but even when I started to try out untap, I saw that pattern. I saw that no matter what I did, whether I made plays or not, whether I played the game good or not, whatever, right? Whether I'm a good player or bad player, whatever you want to believe about me, regardless of what deck I'm playing, the first 4 damage is the easiest. It's very hard not to deal 4 damage with any deck. Let me be more specific. With any leader that at least has 10k power. Now, if you have a leader with 5k power, or even less, but let's say you have a leader with 5k power, granted, that would be a little bit harder unless you combo. Right, so Bulma would be one of those leaders that'll be hard to deal with the first 4 damage easily because of her low attack power. But most other leaders tend to have, you know, a 10,000 plus attack power. So it's not that hard. But obviously, if you incorporate stuff like Champa and some battle cards, some unisons that can attack and do damage, that does make up for it. But typically, if on average, any leader you have that can attack, there are some leaders that can't attack. Hatchet can't attack until you awaken. Some old wish leaders can't attack. So there's and then if you have 5k power, granted, there's some leaders that is hard to deal 4 damage with. But there's tons of leaders that you can easily do the first 4 damage. So that's why the first 4 damage is always the easiest, just because of that alone. And mainly because your opponent's not going to try to stop you. Then the next 2 damage after that requires a little bit of effort, because once your opponent, is at 4 life and is capable of awakening, if that's the condition of their leader, to awaken his 4 life, they'll try to protect that life, but their defenses might still be a little low at that time. So just with a little bit of effort, just maybe even comboing a little bit, would be enough to either they take the 2 damage, or force them to combo out of that attack in order to, not take the damage, but they lose hand advantage in the process. And again, the game is still, you're still early in the game, so, you're still in a beneficial scenario. Whichever outcome happens, whether you deal the damage or not, you're still in a favorable position in that regards. But the last 2 tends to be the hardest, because your opponent's going to put as much effort as they can into preventing that, and also anytime after turn 2, your opponent's capabilities of defending themselves are a lot higher. Then there's, of course, free negates that makes it even much higher. And then there's then there's super combos, right? Then there's the fact that most leaders have draw effects on the front side, so you're going to replenish your hand really quick. You might play a lot of draw effects, so you're going to draw more cards. So you're going to probably have a huge hand size, depending on how you play. So that's why it's understandable that after turn 2, it's going to be harder to do the last 2 damage, if you just happen to do 6 damage on the first 2 turns of the game, like I do with some of my X-hit combo decks. But then, that's one of the many things I did, was, come up with ways to do a lot of damage on like turn 3, do a lot of damage on turn 4, because the more damage you can output, the higher chance you have of dealing the last 2 damage, right? So if I could output 8 damage on turn 4, like, yeah, I'm playing a whole bunch of double strikes and swinging with a whole bunch of double strikes, one of these are going to get through. One of these double strikes are going to get through my opponent's defenses, and then I just got to dump my hand into that attack, right? And hopefully my opponent can't out-combo and I win, right? Because you're always waiting for your opponent to not have blockers, to be tapped out, and to have a lower hand size than you, and then you try to go for game, right? Attack and combo your hand off. Simple, right? Not rocket science. You just gotta set it up, wait for the right moment, and execute. Order 66, as they say, right? So execute your plan, your game plan for winning, which is simple and straightforward. So that's the thing. It's like, it's not hard to explain how to win, because it is basic. It's very simple on how to win. You obviously want to make sure your opponent can't block, your opponent can't negate, your opponent can't out combo. As long as you can do those 3 things, right, or you can prevent those 3 things, you're going to win, right? Because damage is damage, right? As long as you deal all 8 damage, you win. So that's why I said the last 2 is the hardest, because your opponent is going to try to out-combo your attacks. They're going to try to negate. They're going to try to block, right? They're going to try to do something. So that's why you have to, be really good at choosing your win con, right? How you want to win. What's the best course of action? Let's say you can always pretty much force your opponent to tap out, so that way it's hard for them to play negate. They typically, and you also have a way of making sure they don't have blockers. So those are 2 things you don't have to worry about. You might still have to worry about free negates, and then your opponent out combo your attack. But if you make sure you go tall, for example, or go wide, you're able to mitigate their ability to out combo you. So a way to deal with being out comboed is to make sure your attacks are really, for you to go wide is one way, or you go really, really tall, so tall that they can't out combo that attack. But you can go wide, but make sure that the attacks are high, like at least 20K is a good number. So get a whole bunch of 20Ks and swing at your opponent, because that will put your opponent in a position where they need 10K combo power for each attack, right? And if they only have 2 life, you only need 2 attacks to go through. So you might want to have 6 attack, like 6 20Ks, right? Because even if they have 4 super combos in their hands, they can only stop 4 out of the 6 attacks, which means 2 attacks can still go through, right? And that's if they have a hand size of like 6 or less. Because if they have a hand size of 8, right? 4 of them being super combos, and let's say these are not the ones to draw cards or do anything much else other than just give you 10K, hypothetically, they can stop 4 attacks, but then they can stop the last 2 attacks if they have 20 worth of combo power in their hand. So then it's 2 cards per each attack, they can stop it. So out of 8 cards, they could stop those attacks. But this is why you do combo map. This is why you think about the possibility of your opponent having super combos. And if the super combos draw cards, the possibility of getting combo power out of that, getting more battle cards that have 0 cost 5K, right? And then how many 0 cost 5K they might have in their hand. So you count how many cards they have in hand, and then you assume that they might have 4 super combos. So that's 40K power, combo power right there. Then let's say all the super combos draw a card and they get an extra 5K combo power for each time they draw. So that's an extra 20K combo power. So that's 60 combo power, right? And then any extra cards after that is essentially 5K combo power, right? So let's say you have 2 cards extra after that, then that's an extra 10K. So then you have 70K combo power. So in a 6 card hand, there's potential for 70K combo power plus the leader, that's 85K. So you'll need to get your whatever attack you're going with. Let's say it's just 1 attack. You want, you're going tall. You want that attack to be 85K and above. 80 is not enough. An 80K attack is not enough. Your opponent can out combo. Granted, they have to use their whole hand, but they can do it. That's the whole point. So you want it to at least be 85K in order for the attack to go through. Or if you can get 2 attacks, right, and get them at, get them at, and have them at like 40K each, if I'm right, that's the math. Give me a second. Well, I have to think hard about that specific scenario, but if you have 2 attacks that, like I say, are 40K, then your opponent is going to need, in order to stop each attack, they're going to need about 30 combo power, right? 30 plus 15 is 45, right? So they're going to need at least 30 combo power per each attack. So you might not want to go 40K in that scenario, because if I'm right, they could afford it. Yeah. So you'll want the attacks to be, what, 50K each? So 50K each. And then we'll need 40K to become 55 for 40K, that's 80K combo power, but they can only manage 70 combo power in total. So yeah, you'll want to be, I said 50K. So essentially you want to be 45K each battle card, or 50K, no, round those two numbers, each of your battle cards, in order to greatly increase your chances of your attacks going through. So there's that. So that's the thing, is just you gotta do some math, which is why it's important for you to practice that idea, practice, doing combo maths, practice figure out how strong your battle cards or your attacks have to be compared to your opponent's hand size in order to determine out your chances of your attacks getting through. Obviously, certain strategies like Android 17 turn tides, making sure your opponent can't combo or even negate because you took every card out the hand. The only thing you have to worry about is blockers. If they have blockers on the field, then they can block. So you need to make sure they have no blockers, then play 17 turn tides, and hopefully they lose their whole hand, right? Which means no combo power, no negates, and you can start swinging for game. And make sure they're low life, like 2 life ideally, or I could do 3 life, but ideally you want them to have 2 life. That way it just be Android 17 and your leader is all you'll need for game. But if your opponent has 3 life, then you'll need a unison. But that's the thing, is that I've been trying out different things, experimenting, testing out different concepts and ideas, and improving as a player to the point where it's like, okay, I understand the game very well. I've mastered certain aspects of the game, and then I share that mastering, that concept. Like I started sharing the idea of like how to predict what's in your opponent's hand based off of their energy, right? How to predict what's in their hand based off of when you activate an effect to make them discard a card. Based off of what they discard, that gives you a good idea of what's in their hand. Because typically most people discard cards from their hands that they feel they can't use. First off, they can't use as combo. For example, if they discard a big 5 drop battle card from their hand that costs 1 energy to combo 10K, right? Clearly, they more likely have super combos in their hand. They're trying to keep, because those are free. You can combo them for free, obviously. And they're trying to keep their 5K combo powers. So they'll keep the battle cards, like super combos, for example, that can be comboed for free. They'll keep those. Even I do that. They'll keep those, right? I'll keep the stuff that I can play for free, right? But if I have to pay an energy for like combo power, for example, that I would get rid of. So if I'm in a position where I have to discard something, I would typically discard, something that has 10K combo power, but it requires an energy. First, then I would discard something that has 0 cost 5K, just because I could use the 0 cost combo power. Especially if my opponent's trying to make me discard cards from my hands in order to attack, then of course it makes sense for me to get rid of the battle cards that cost energy to combo and keep the cards that I can combo for free in my hand, so when they do attack, I can combo them. Granted, that means I'm going to have less cards in my hands, but at least I'm not going to take damage, especially if my opponent's trying to go for game. If they're trying to go for game, I'd rather be in that situation where I can combo. I might lose, half or more than half of my hand size, but at least I'll survive that turn and have another chance to try to make a comeback, right? At least a chance to try to win. Because if I can win next turn, then it's more reasons for me to try to survive that turn. So ideally, if I'm forced to discard cards, I'm going to discard battle cards that have 1 energy combo power, as an example. So if your opponent does that, well, they're trying to conserve, they're trying to save their 0 cost 5Ks. So there's 5Ks in their hands. That there's a possibility they might have a super combo, but If they have a super combo, they typically will always keep it anyway, so it's irrelevant. I'm just saying that there's a high possibility. So here's the thing. I always assume my opponent has super combos. I just make my life easier that way and just assume they always have it. Not just one, but like all four of them. It's better to assume they have all four, because I've been in a scenario where my opponent did have all four, or at least three. So I rather assume they always have 4 super combos. That way, I don't get surprised. Whereas when I'm like trying to go for game and then they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, like, oh damn it, you actually had all 4. I rather assume they have 4 and then play as if they have all 4 than to assume they don't have all 4 and then it turns out they do, right? It's the whole plan for the worst, hope for the best. And that's how I do things. Same thing as I play as if my opponent is a 15K leader. I don't play as my opponent is a 10K leader. Even if my opponent hasn't awakened yet, I always play with the mindset of my opponent's leader being 15K. So I'm always focusing on that. So everything I do is based off of, dealing with something that has 15K combo, 15K power, base power, and go and work from that. So that's why I'd rather have stuff that has 15K power or higher. Obviously now I'm on the whole 20K and above concept. 30K and above is the new, but and I'm trying to do a whole bunch of 40Ks. I'm trying to put a lot of 40Ks into my deck strategies. But I'm gotta wait until Bandai prints more 40Ks so I can incorporate more 40Ks into my decks. But 20, 25, and 30Ks are some of the typical powers I put into my decks. A lot of Unison's good ones anyway have 20K combo, 20K power, so of course I play them a lot. And a couple 19Ks, they're close to 20. And then some 30Ks here and there. So I try to incorporate that as much as possible, because that goes with my whole no combo strategy. The whole idea of just playing that when I do combo is only defensive. It's never offensive. That's just a waste of cards to try to make your attack stronger when you could just play stronger cards. Play stuff that has high attacks. It's just common sense. It's not rocket science. It's just common sense. Play stuff that's stronger so you don't have to combo when you attack, right? But if you do combo, that puts your opponent in a position where they have to combo more. It's like, shit, 35K attacker. Shit, I don't want to take that damage, so I have to try to out-combo it. You rather have your opponent in that position, not you be in that position. Because if somebody attacks me with a strong battle card, I'll just take the hit or negate it or block it. Those are my only options, and that's the only options I really need. I'd rather not combo. I definitely don't want to combo against strong attacks. I'll take strong attacks. I'll combo against weak attacks if I could afford it. Like if, it's not a problem for me to just, combo a 5K because it's not part of my, winning strategy, then I have no problem doing it. But other than that, I'm not going to try to out combo a strong attack. I just rather take it. What else? And there's so many different things that that I figured out, obviously from playing the game, and then I shared. But the irony that a lot of players in the community don't respect the work, right? The effort that I put into understanding this game, so that way I can share my insights. Well, they don't appreciate that I share my insights, because obviously me learning and mastering the game is for me, for my own personal benefits of being good at the game. So that way, if I go to tournaments, I can do very well because I'm really good at the game type thing. Am I perfect? No. That's the whole point of this podcast. Ironically, the episode is to point out the fact that it's like there was a time where it's like, yes, because the way the game used to be, right? And since I already understood, the basic stuff you need to understand about winning the game, because the game is not complicated. It's just that over time, Bandai started adding stuff to the game that made it a little bit harder. For example, sparking negates. Super combos that don't require your opponent to be 4 life or less. right? When they started adding stuff like that, even started adding free blockers you could play for free just because you play a certain leader or something. Little things like that. Those small little details made a huge difference because that allowed your opponent to be able to defend themselves while still being on the offense. Allows them to attack and defend, not choose between attacking and defending. And then they started adding, I'm not going to go into the whole list of things that they added to the game that makes it, more complicated, more difficult than it was when, I first started playing the game. Part of why, back then when I was like, oh, this game is easy, it's not that hard to do a lot of damage, I was just pointing out, facts. I was pointing out, a obvious observation, especially from my own experience, that it's like, it's not that hard to do a lot of damage because people used to, like I said, people used to play slower than me, that it would take longer than 4 turns for them to get their opponent down to 2 life, let alone win the game. And I'm like, it doesn't take me that long. By turn 4, my opponent's already at 2 life. When me and my friends are playing, I get them down to 2 life. I get them down to 2 life by turn 4, and I'm still like at 5 life, 5 or 6. I'm still at 5 or 6 life, and they're at 2 life by turn 4. That's how I play. That's not how the community was playing out there, but that's how I was playing. So then all I had to do is just deal the last 2 damage, right? Double strike for game, right? So it wasn't surprising when that's what I did, especially when Overwhelm became a thing. It's like, oh, awesome. And then the Awakened Warrior Bardic, like, oh, yeah, that's nice because after I do everything to try to go for game and my opponent goes out of the way to stop me from going for game, and then now I could take advantage of double playing this battle card for free and finishing them off. Got a little distracted. So I lost train of thought of what I was talking about. I play faster, differently than everybody else. Yeah, it doesn't take me that long. Yeah, double strike. So I play over Realm and swing with Bardic. He has double strike, and I dump the rest of the cards in my hand because clearly I didn't use a lot of my cards in my hands to combo in the first place because I'm just swinging with basic cards. The main thing is I'm swinging with like a whole bunch of 15Ks just to get my opponent to like combo 5K, out their hand. And hopefully I made them waste a lot of their super combos earlier. So that way there's not much left in their hand, except maybe a couple of negates and stuff, but they can't play because they're tapped out, especially if they already played some negates already. And then just drop over Realm and just swing, with a surprise attack like there. Swing, dump my whole hand into that. Even if you have cards in your hands to combo, even if you have a couple super combos, it might not be enough. And then go for game. And that's, one of the many things that I did. Another thing I did was the 5-drop Go Tanks, Super Saiyan 3 Go Tanks, Ghost Attack, right? The one where you play, you get 3 tokens, and if you have 4 or less cards in your hands, the tokens and him get double strike, so you have the potential to do 8 damage off of playing 1 card, right? And then you could just use the battle cards in your hands, right? Like super combos and stuff like that, and just power up your tokens and just get that double strike damages to go through. I mean, one of the issues with that is the fact that your opponent is obviously adding 2 cards every time you deal damage. Potentially, those cards can be used to out-combo your attacks. But since you have 4 attacks, and more likely, depending on the situation, obviously, typically when I played it, my opponent's at 2 life. So when I'm swinging, they're comboing to try to survive. But then they're like, okay, I don't have enough to out-combo all the attacks, right? Especially if you combo with the tokens, right? You use cards in your hands to make the tokens stronger. That greatly increases the chances of them not being able to out-combo every one of your attacks, including, you still got your leader swing, right? So you still have, you have a total of 5 attacks with the potential of doing 9 damage. The likelihood of you getting through and getting getting the last 2 damage is highly possible. That's the whole going wide thing. Going wide with multiple damage, of course, not just going wide. So that combination there greatly increases your chance of winning. So a lot of my W's were because of that, or because of overwhelm, or just because I was able to attack with a leader, no negate. My opponent's hand size was small, so I chomp and dump my hand into the attack and game. So that was how simple and straightforward the game was, at least for me. But it was weird to see the community was playing differently, and well, teach their own, but I played differently than they did. And it works for me. And the irony is, it took many years, and this was in 2019, so it took many years after that, like 2020, 2021, for the community to catch on to the idea that maybe we should play faster. Maybe we should, try to do turn 2 kills and stuff like that. So after a while, certain things started, happening. 1-2 swap and make a Frieza apes and this and that. Like a lot of stuff started coming in where people started playing more like how I play. But that's the thing. I was doing it before everybody else was doing it. Everybody else was playing slow. I was playing fast. So of course, I'm online pointing out how easy the game is and how you can do more damage faster and win faster while everybody playing slow for. But I was the wrong one, right? They viewed me as I didn't know what I was talking about. And they didn't even believe it was possible to get your opponent down to 2 life by turn 4. But then, untap was a thing. And then I was able to get on an untap and prove it and show it like, look how easy it is. But of course, stuff like negates, sparking negates and stuff like that start coming into the game. So, it made the game a little bit harder. So it's like, okay, I can't consistently win as much as I used to when they started adding these types of things. And then later on, we started getting some other stuff like after a while, people started playing more blockers. So that made the game a little bit more difficult. People started playing more blockers. Then Boma was a thing. It's like, oh, that's a lot of blockers right there. And, and then slowly the game progressed, so it got a little bit more difficult. But still, a lot of my original concept still holds true. And that's where the whole first 4 damage is still easiest, regardless of if this is set 1 or set 19 or set 100. Still, the first 4 damage is the easiest. The next 2 requires a little effort, and the last 2 is, it's the hardest, right? So it's all about, trying to figure out, not figure out, but trying to get to the point where you can just, finish your opponent off with the last 2 damage, or use some other win con. So the game is easy. I won consistently a lot in the beginning of the game, but over time, it's been easier for people to beat me, because it was harder for them to beat me back then, but it's easier for them to beat me now, so they have more of a chance. And I like a challenge. I don't want the game to be that easy, because then it just be boring and pointless. Shit, I barely play Digimon because it's relatively easy for me, and it's like not much to do there, not much of a challenge in that game for me to keep playing and working on deck designs and concepts for it. But Dragon Ball Super, still, intrigues me, right? Still entices me to create decks and try different strategies, and always trying to innovate new spice, always trying to find some new spicy tech that I can use to improve decks. Because whenever new sets come out, I'm always looking for little gems to improve on some of my decks. And then, of course, share that knowledge with the rest of the community, whether they like it or not. And that's the end of the podcast.